Hello everybody for the real start of the episode. Welcome to the last webinar on the Mobycon Academy series for 2020. Today we're going to talk about roundabouts, again my favorite topic. To talk about roundabouts with us is Eveline de Jong, my colleague who ran the roundabouts webinar last time, if you've seen that. We had so many questions come in and there's so much to explore in terms of roundabouts that we thought it would be a good idea to dedicate a whole episode to roundabouts for you today. So today we have 10 questions, the 10 biggest questions probably that came in through the last webinar and through the email that we're going to discuss. And then if we have time, we're going to show you some good and bad examples of roundabouts in the Netherlands that we think illustrate some valid points about roundabout design and how far you can stretch the design, because some are honestly quite hilarious. So with that being said, we hope you enjoy the episode. There's not a break in the middle, so we'll just keep going. It's probably going to run for about 45 minutes. If you have any questions along the way, additional questions, you can leave them in the comment section on YouTube and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. So with that, I think we can start with the first question that came in through the email. And that is a question we get quite regularly. How do we make roundabouts safe for people with sight impairments? Blind people or people with not perfect sight, can they navigate these roundabouts? And if so, how do they do it and how can we design them to be safe for them? Eveline, hello,
yes.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We see this question come up quite regularly in all types of design from the Netherlands, but with roundabouts in particular, is there any insight you have on that?
Well, with a roundabout, you do have a larger footprint that you have to navigate, but we do design them in this way that it's a really good flow to walk around them. So it feels natural to walk around the roundabout, and we do have textiles or textured on the ground, and we also teach how to get around a roundabout in courses. So they know what to expect when there's a roundabout. So
right.
That's also one of the points to make it easier to navigate it. But also with how the footpaths attach to the roundabout, so that you don't have to walk all the way around it, but that it feels natural.
Right. So the what's important is what you're saying is the approach towards the roundabout, that it's not a 90-degree zigzag,
No.
but you just continue your footpath along the way. And is there any ways to make it safer or more comfortable for people with sight impairments?
If you raise the platforms where they cross, so the zebra crossings, if you have that raised on a platform, so you don't have a height difference between the walkway and where you just are walking on the footpath, that's also easier to navigate it.
Yeah.
It's important if you do that there is some textile on the pavement that says that you are about to cross, because otherwise you wouldn't know, but it makes it easier with less steps.
Right. So it's a step-free, you don't have curbs to cross that might be trip hazards or, And because it's a priority, because you have a good roundabout has a pedestrian priority, do you think that's better for people with sight impairments or easier to cross?
I think so, or at least when they know that they can safely cross. If they have priority, then if all the roundabouts in the municipality are also designed that way, that's also why it's important to have the same standard. And
that's obviously is difficult for if you're just starting to build these, right? The first one's going to be very different. So that might require some more training for people with sight impairments or the foundation of the blind or somebody to give people some training. And what about the speed at the roundabout? Because I can imagine it's a different design speed here. Does that have implications for people with impairments?
Well, we design roundabouts to slow people down, so that's also why you have a bump if you have the priority. If you have a bump there, then it also slows vehicles down. So that helps with. It's always better to have slower cars than faster driving cars.
Regardless of your
regardless
physical
if you can see or not see.
And also for wheelchair users, right? Same thing. So speed is critical. Yeah.
And also good sight lines so that the vehicles can actually see you crossing.
Right.
That's also important. Also that they can see that you maybe have some disability or some impairment.
Yeah.
That also helps because then they can adjust their speed and slow down and know when you are done crossing.
Yeah. So you also rely a little bit on the politeness or the driver actually following the rules properly, but that's the same with any design, I guess, right? Yeah. Okay. I hope that answered the question of whoever sent that one in. I think we can go to the second question, which is probably a little bit technical one, but what's the level of traffic that you can, we see it on the screen. What level of traffic is safe for an at-grade crossing for pedestrians? Like how many cars can you have, or is there a guideline or a rule that you follow?
We do have a number of cars, but that's more dependent on the design of the roundabout. So for pedestrian crossings, you actually only want to cross one lane. Or if you have 2 lanes that you want to cross, it's only at the entry point and not the exit point, because at the exit point, most of the time, the speed is higher than on the entry point. Right.
So we've got a slide that shows 3 types of roundabout.
Yep.
So the first one on the left,
yep.
Can you speak to that one?
Yeah, so that's the 1-lane roundabout. So that's the most typical roundabout in urban areas, at least. So you have 1 entry lane, 1 exit lane. So you only have to cross about 4 meters. So that's a normal crossing distance for people to cross. So an at-grade crossing is possible there. Then the middle one, the turbo roundabout with 2 entry lanes and 1 exit lane, you can do an at-grade crossing. It is possible. I don't know if I would recommend it, or you can do it, but it's not the most safe option. Right. But it is possible.
Yeah. But then you wouldn't put a zebra crossing there, would you?
No. Well, it depends on if you have cycle priority. Because if you have cycle priority, you also have priority for the pedestrians. But I think in most cases, this type of roundabout is outside of the urban area. Yeah. And there aren't any pedestrians or such a low level, so there isn't any crossing.
Right. Yeah. And then the third one on the right?
Yeah, so don't do an at-grade crossing at that one.
Solid advice.
Yeah, because at the exit lane, if you have 1 vehicle, they can stop the side for the other vehicle, and then you can get hit by a car.
Yeah. So if 1 car stops to be nice to a pedestrian,
and the other car doesn't,
and the other one because they maybe don't have to, or because they're not expecting.
Yeah, they don't see anyone standing there.
And there's no safe place to wait. No. 1 lane at a time. So then it's,
you think you can cross, you thank them, the first person nicely, and then.
So actually, it's quite easy. It's just 1 lane is good, 2 lanes is bad.
Yeah.
But maybe you can get away with 2 lanes.
Yeah, but with an entry point, if you can have it any other way, then. Yeah.
If you have the opportunity, take it and don't put it there.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a good realization that there's no black or white in safety, right? These guidelines, they say it's recommended this way. It gets progressively worse when you start adding lanes, and that's just simple. But there's not a real turning point where they say you're not allowed to do this. They just say it's not recommended, but think for yourself. Yeah.
Well, at the 2 lanes, 2 exit lanes, never
that's
do
a no-no.
That's a real no.
Yeah, that's quite interesting that we think differently about entry lanes and exit lanes, right? Because I think a lot of people see a roundabout and they just say, oh, there's 2 lanes in and 2 lanes out. Yeah. But they actually have quite different characteristics. Because how do we see them? Like what's the difference as you approach a roundabout? You think differently, or you?
Well, as you approach the roundabout, you enter slowly because you know that you have to give way, you have to give priority, even if there is no cycle path or anything. You always have to give priority to the one coming from your left. So that's why you slow down. Yeah. And at the entry point, you know you have priority, or at least
at the exit.
At the exit, if the other person is actually following the rules,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course, but then you have priority. So we do know that people speed up when they drive around the roundabouts.
Right.
And you also see it in the turning radii used in the design. So the turning radii for entering is 12
Right.
meters,
Yeah.
and exiting is 20.
Right. So we already anticipate
Yep.
that they're going to do it, and we actually design
Yep.
for it. That's maybe not such a good idea. Maybe we found a little flaw in the system. Interesting. So I think that's a really good lesson for the viewers at home. Think differently about your entry design as your exit design, because they are the traffic psychology is just very different, and that has implications on the safety for people crossing that. It's kind of common sense. Like, it makes sense when you say
Yeah.
it, but you never think about it that way. Very good. All right. The third question, buses. Because buses can't take roundabouts, can they? How would you do that? You can't do that. But the actual question is, do roundabouts need to be wider if there is a lot of bus traffic? Do you design them differently at all?
I don't think we design them differently if is there one bus or a lot of buses.
Right.
We usually design them on the highest or the biggest vehicle that there is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's a bus most of the cases.
Usually.
Usually. And we do have aprons or that sort of thing if there are.
We have a slide here that shows, it's a pretty famous video by now.
Yeah.
If you've seen the previous webinar, you've seen this video come along, but this is a bus navigating the roundabout and some cyclists riding on the footpath, but that's okay. Yeah, so what do we see here? We see the bus going around, and it doesn't even really touch the apron, does it?
No, just with one tire.
Yeah.
But
Right
a
at the
roundabout
end.
is usually also designed, the lane of a roundabout is around 5 meters or something. So while a normal car lane is like 3 meters. So that's also just the normal design of a roundabout is actually quite large.
Yeah, and good enough for a bus.
Yeah, good enough for a bus.
And you wouldn't design it differently if there's 10 or 20 buses an hour or 50?
No.
No, because
No.
it's still, if it fits one,
Yeah.
it will fit, right?
Because if you make a roundabout even wider, then most of the time the speed also goes up.
Right, the
And
speed of the normal cars as
yeah,
well, right?
of the normal
Yeah.
cars, but also for the buses, because if they know that it's not a really tight roundabout, then
Yeah.
they can also speed through.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And then the whole purpose of the roundabout is lost.
Because buses are also dangerous if they
Yeah.
go fast.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's more mass than a car.
We see a bus stuck in traffic now on the slide, but let's not go there. Right, so that's a good thing to remember as well. Like, volume and design vehicle of the volume is not necessarily correlated. You have a design vehicle that you use, and that will work for however many of
Yep.
those design vehicles you need.
Yeah,
Right.
the design vehicle and the speed.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then we saw that video with the apron so the bus just touched it a little bit because it did a 3/4 turn. So that tells you it's a different design vehicle, or
Yeah.
because it was quite a big apron, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they used an even larger vehicle as the design
Yeah.
vehicle for at least the aprons.
Yeah. And that means that the bus can go around quite comfortably.
Yep.
And doesn't even get the jolt or the
Yep.
discomfort for passengers that we sometimes hear about.
Yep.
Can't do that for a bus because the poor passengers are going to be rattling in their seats. Yeah,
Yep.
you don't want that. Right, so you just make sure that you have a good design vehicle, and then maybe a second control vehicle, which
Yep.
could be a bus, and then make sure that for a normal passenger car, it doesn't go too fast. And you
Yep.
have to find the balance between those three.
Yep.
That makes sense. That makes sense, doesn't it? Right. Then we have the fourth question, which is a slightly even more technical question. What about the camber? Now we'll explain that in a little bit. But do Dutch roundabouts have an inner camber, or are they flat? And the camber is basically the elevation, or how wide or how high or what angle the road is laid at, basically. You can imagine water that falls onto the road needs to flow into a certain direction to get to the drainage pit, especially in the Netherlands, given we're below sea level. Every single drop that falls from the sky needs to be caught somewhere and pumped back out. And then in Netherlands, do we have flat roundabouts, or are they are they a little bit higher in the middle? How do we design? It's quite technical. If you don't find it interesting, just skip to the next 2 minutes. But
Yeah, so we do have a camber of a couple of percent for the rain. And usually the center part is higher than the
right.
the
We have a
outer
little
part.
slide
Yep.
that shows you the cross section. Maybe you can explain what we're looking at, because also the photo on the top left is quite interesting. But
Yeah.
at the bottom you see the camber, right?
Yep. Yeah, so at the bottom is the camber of the road. So that's about
The black thing is the road.
black thing is the road. So that's 2.5%. So that's come through also for cars. They really rarely notice the difference in height.
Yeah.
And then for the middle part, so for the apron, that's higher, and that only has a 1%. And they only have that at 1% because if it's higher or a higher gradient, then the trucks can tip over.
Right.
Don't want that.
Yeah. No, that sounds like a bad idea.
No.
Right. So it's more flat. The actual rumble strip or the apron is more flat than the roadway, the circulatory roadway.
Yep.
But then there's a bit in the middle. Oops,
Yep.
sorry. That is the end of the apron.
Yep.
And there's a lip of 2 to 3 centimeters.
Yep.
And that's to stop cars from driving on it, or just
Yeah, I think it's to stop cars from wanting to
right?
to make it even
Yeah, make it fun.
make it more fun.
Right. And that's just 1 inch, 1.5 inch. The difference between the roadway and the
And also
to the
for larger vehicles to also slow them down.
yeah.
I think.
And a lot of these elements are prefabricated, right?
Yes. Yeah, so the it says rotonde block. Then the block thing is prefabricated, and then the apron can be prefabricated. They also have the whole element as a whole.
Yeah.
And then they only have to make the asphalt, so the black bit.
Yeah.
But
They pour that in place.
yeah, they pour that in place, and then they can also put the other things just.
Right.
Yeah, so it's quite easy.
It's very efficient.
Yeah.
There's some good time-lapse videos on YouTube of people building roundabouts, if you're really interested. If you have some time over the holidays.
Yeah.
And then what do we see in the top left? Because it looks like a truck parked on a roundabout, but is that the case?
Yeah, when I first saw the photo, I also thought it was parked. But if you look really closely, you can see that the end of the truck is actually at the beginning of the entryway. So because it's such a large truck, so an articulated truck, it has to move around the entire apron because otherwise it can't take the turn.
Yeah.
So the design or the control vehicle may be too small for this roundabout.
Or it's a very large truck.
Or a very large truck.
But you can also see that they have the apron on the inside, right? On the left-hand side, like an apron for the truck turning into the... So it's a double apron roundabout.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, they usually only make the apron on the exit and not on the entry.
Right.
Or less usual.
Yeah,
but in this case, maybe they knew that there were some very large trucks using this roundabout.
If it's a heavy industrial area or something, you can choose to add more apron to allow for the trucks.
Yep.
But you can imagine this truck is not going to go very fast.
So
It can get through, but barely.
it can get through, but
Right.
maybe at 10 kilometers per hour or something.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can move.
Yeah, exactly. It can get there.
Yeah.
Okay. Then if we go on to the next question, which is already question number 5, if you have an asymmetric flow, how does that function, or how does that work in terms of the design of a roundabout? So if you're gonna, I'll just explain asymmetric flow. If you have 4 legs into the roundabout, ideally, or if you want to make it work most optimally, get to the 25,000 or 28,000 vehicles capacity, it's best if all flows are about the same. So you have 6,000 cars from the left, 6,000 cars from the right, and other way, up and down. But can you do a roundabout when it's not equal, or do you run into problems?
No, you can do that. That's always possible, but you really have to take into account what kind of roundabout you're making. So for just 1 lane roundabout, you can run into the problem that you can't enter the roundabout, or you have difficulty entering the roundabout because you always have to wait because there's a lot of traffic coming around.
Because it starts the flow from on the main trunk route, and then you try and squeeze in. But if that flow is super heavy, then you never find a spot.
Well, it's most difficult, I think, with 2-lane roundabouts, because then if you have a 2-lane roundabout, which we never really have in the Netherlands, but you have a lot of the time in France, for example, then you don't know where anyone is going, so that's even more difficult to think when can I enter. So then you really have to wait a long time. So I think with the single lane, it is sometimes more difficult, but it's not impossible. And then with a turbo roundabout, you do know where everyone is going, so that makes it a bit easier. And then you just have, for the leg that has less traffic, you would just have less lanes. So maybe you only have one entry, one exit. For another, you have 2 entry and 1 exit.
Maybe we can find an example in a minute, but right. So that's another example or another advantage of the turbo roundabout, because it's more predictable about where people are going. So you know, I only have to give way to people in that lane and not in that lane. While otherwise they might be. I hadn't thought of that yet. So then, do we often see roundabouts at like busy driveway exit or something, or is it relatively uncommon?
Well, you usually do a roundabout when you have 2 equal flows.
So it's preferred, and otherwise you just have a giveaway sign, right?
But I think in some cases there are even roundabouts that have an exit construction, so you have just 3 normal lanes and then 1 just someone with a farm or something that just lands on the roundabout. So apparently that's also a possibility. It works.
And they just, it works the same, right? They also have to give way to
you also have
everybody.
To give way, so that is also a possibility. And maybe some of the times you have to wait, but I think with roundabouts there's less frustration. So with a traffic light, you may be thinking, I had to wait for the last traffic light, I had to wait 2 minutes, and now I just run this orange light because I don't want to wait another time. While at a roundabout, you just see that there's also a lot of traffic, so you don't want to squeeze in.
Right. So instead of having to wait for the stupid machine to give you green time, you actually are looking at other vehicles and finding the gap there. So it's more relying on yourself and your how you perceive the rest of the world. That's quite interesting.
And sometimes it's even so that maybe someone's coming from your left side and they do have priority, but they know that you've been waiting a long time. So they just don't enter the roundabout, so you can negotiate.
Yes, because if they hold back for another second, you can squeeze in first. And you can't do that with a traffic light.
No.
Roundabouts, more social. So many advantages to roundabouts. Who doesn't love a good roundabout? Nice. So short answer is yes, it's possible. But you might, depending on how asymmetrical, again, it's not black or white, but the more asymmetrical it gets, the longer the expected wait is for the people on the small leg.
If you have like 800 against 2 or something, then it's nearly impossible. Maybe then it's better to see if you can connect at another point.
All right, just make the entryway into a side street. More side street configuration and straight onto the roundabout. Or further upstream or something. That makes sense. All right. A little bit related, question number 6. What about like a lopsided roundabout? Is there any examples of an asymmetric roundabout that has a cycleway on one side but maybe not on the other? Short answer, I think, is yes. Do you have an example?
Yes.
We have a beautiful example right here on the screen. There you go. Look at that beauty. Isn't it gorgeous? I forgot which city it's in. Amersfoort?
No, I don't think this one is.
No, it's not Amersfoort. We'll find the link. Put it in the show notes.
So you can see it is possible, but when you do have a lopsided one or one-sided bicycle path, it usually means that you have a two-way bicycle path, or at least in most cases, because otherwise the cyclist can't go around.
Yeah.
So you do have to pay extra attention to how you design the crossing. So with the red, with the, I think there are arrows on it as well, and it's also raised, and all these things make it extra, make it stand out.
Yeah.
And if you do have a two-way cycle path, just make sure that there are both also two-way bicycle paths.
Right.
Because if you enter on the leg that only has a one-way, and you exit it and you don't expect it to be a two-way, then it can have disastrous results.
Right. So the more signage and paint and speed tables and stuff you see, the riskier it probably was. So it's a good tip for Google Maps people if you're really interested in seeing how it works. The more signage, it's probably not necessarily a good idea. Try and avoid it, but if you do need to, then make sure they have bidirectional on all sides, not just partial. Bidirectional. Right, yes, because okay, I get you now. If you enter on a side that has a single lane, you're looking to the left, you're like, oh, no bikes there. You just keep looking in the same place, and then there's...
Then you exit it, and then there's a bike coming from the right.
I think we do have an example of one of those later, because they do get built.
They do get built. But
not everything on Google Maps is perfect.
No.
Right.
In some cases, you even see that cyclists just use the one where there's only a one-way bicycle path, they just use it in both ways, because they already had a two-way on the other leg as well. So
and
they just want to continue and be on their way.
And would you have kept the design, if we can go back to the slide, would you have designed it in this way, or what could you have done to make it a little bit better? Is there any other way to do this, or is it just, well, that's just a network and you got to make the most of it?
Yeah, I think in this case the network already had two-way bicycle paths. I don't know why there's also a two-way bicycle path going to the lower left corner, because otherwise you only had to cross at the roundabout once. But I don't know where this is or what's in the neighborhood.
It needs a bit more network analysis to see what's going on.
I think in all cases you really want to have just a one-way bicycle path. That's always the safest, unless you just have functions or something on one side. Then it makes sense. Or if you have water on the other side and nothing on it, and on the other side you have a school, you don't want people to cross. No,
just to get to the bike path. So that's also quite a useful tip probably if you're starting to build bike lanes more in the Dutch style. And you want to give them priority, don't start with bidirectionals.
I wouldn't recommend it.
No, that would be less safe. Well, that's good that we saw Cambridge, right? They did a one direction. That seems to be going well. Good. Then another, well, we don't know if it's a myth yet, but another strongly it keeps popping up. Do roundabouts need more land? Is question number 7. Do they need more land to fit into the same footprint, or can we actually do a conversion? What do you have to say to people that say, it doesn't fit a roundabout because it's too big?
Well, it depends on the roundabout. So
always good answer.
So if you have a small roundabout, then it's smaller. Makes sense. While usually when you have already a big intersection, you already have 2 entry and 2 exit lanes on all sides, then the intersection is already quite big, so then the difference isn't that great. Right. So if you have an urban area where there's slow traffic or low traffic volumes, you maybe can do with a roundabout without any traffic facilities, cycle facilities, because you can just mix the traffic. Then it's a really, really small roundabout, so it hardly takes up any more space. And
that would still be safer?
Yes.
That's good to know. We also have an example on the slide from the beautiful town of Ridderkerk, south of Rotterdam. I think we have used this before. So this is the before situation.
Yeah, so 2 entry, 2 exits, or 3,
3 on the south
4
even.
on the,
Yeah, 4, yeah, with a
I
bus
think a
lane.
bus lane, yeah.
And they have rebuilt into this. You can see the building top left. So that's, well, maybe a slightly larger footprint, but it's not much.
Well, with the
right?
cycle paths, I think.
Yeah, no, not if you include the cycle
No.
paths.
With the cycle paths, the roundabout is it's smaller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that it can fit into the
Yep.
same footprint. What probably happened here is that the intersection, the signalized intersection, might have been overbuilt a little bit, was a
Yep.
little bit bigger than they actually needed. So maybe the traffic model predicted a volume that they never got to,
Yep.
which meant that they could revert back to a roundabout because it does have less capacity, right?
Yep.
This configuration would have less capacity than the previous one.
Yep.
Right. So then they were like, well, we can make it safer by just reverting it back.
Yep.
And it looks like it fit into the same footprint. So yes, maybe you have less space for approach lanes,
Yep.
right? Because you can get away with only one often.
Yep.
But you do have more space because you go in a circular
Yep.
fashion.
Yeah, and maybe there's a lot of cycle traffic or bicycle traffic
Right.
on this part,
Probably.
and
yes.
that also mostly means in a traffic light situation that you have a lot more lanes, approach lanes, because you want to have every second counts, so you
yes.
want to separate them as most. So maybe that's why it's also was big, and now you can do it a lot smaller.
Right. That's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Because if we look at this,
Yeah.
if you have high bicycle volume,
Yeah.
that reduces the car volume,
Yes.
and it increases the space.
Yeah, because in this case, maybe you have like a couple of vehicles turning left, but if you turn left, then the whole intersection is down,
Yeah.
because you can only turn left, or at least the other one can also turn left from the other side,
Mhm.
but you can't do anything more. While when a car just turns right, you only have to have a couple of seconds because you enter and exit quite fast.
Right.
While if you turn left, you have to have a larger.
Yeah. So while this may look like a very high capacity intersection,
Yeah.
maybe because if the traffic volume for bikes increases,
Yeah.
the total capacity goes down
Yep.
to a point where a roundabout might be more efficient.
Yep.
Aha, look at that. I learned something today as well. Which this indicates quite nicely, because if you can
Yep.
imagine a car turning left here, for 90% of the time, all the other traffic can still go as well.
Yep.
It's only at the crossing points, or where the other cars need to hold back a little bit for the car to go. Then you have to stop or limit the capacity, but otherwise it's continuous.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, and the interesting in this one is also that it has a two-directional cycle path on the north side.
Yeah.
And it does connect very nicely to the other sides as well, because the other sides don't have a two-way. So that's also means it's less tempting to cycle the wrong way.
Because otherwise you have to go the whole way
Yep.
against the traffic instead of just one bit.
Yep.
And because you're in full priority
Yep.
as a bike, it doesn't actually take that much more time.
No.
Right?
No, and you can see where they attached the cycle lane. If they would have attached it a bit more to the right,
Mm-hmm.
then it would have been in direct contact with
Yeah.
the south one, and then that wouldn't.
No, then it's too
That
tempting
wouldn't
to
work.
go
Yeah.
against traffic. Yeah, that makes sense.
And it doesn't have a two-way on the south side as well, so that's
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
makes it less tempting to.
Yeah. So that's
Go
the
the
lesson
other
is
way
if you do have a bidirectional path,
Yeah.
a roundabout, if you want to attempt a roundabout with bike priority, it's actually a really good spot to transition
Yep.
to unidirectional paths if that's the next
Yep.
phase of your project. So if you're in a new city, you often start, or you're new into the cycling business, you often start with bidirectional paths
Yep.
because they're easy to build, and less reduction in car parks or whatever.
Yeah, that takes up less space.
Yeah.
Because you then maybe have 3 meters instead of 2 times 2 meters.
Right,
so
right.
1
Yeah.
meter.
And only one buffer.
Yep.
Yeah. So those are all advantages, but then at some point you're going to be like, okay, we're not going to extend the whole network in bidirectionals.
Yep.
Then maybe a roundabout is perfect.
Yep.
That's good strategy. And it could help that if it does get very popular, that your traffic lights reduce in volume to a point where the roundabout becomes competitive again.
Yep.
And it fits.
And it fits.
Usually.
Usually. Yeah. Sometimes we do have to have a little trick to make it
work.
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we'll get to a slide where it's probably wouldn't fit in a second as well. There's obviously tons of examples where it obviously wouldn't fit, and then you can look at reducing car capacity, or maybe a traffic light is the best solution. I mean,
in some case it can be.
Yeah, and there's hundreds of traffic lights in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
It's not like it's a country full of roundabouts, but they do have their advantages.
That's France.
That's France, yeah. We'll get to France as well. Oh, shall we do France? Oh, no. Oh, this is actually... Oh, no. We'll go to the next question before we get sidetracked by funny roundabouts from overseas. The bicycle priority question. Now, we've talked about this. This is a difficult question because it's actually not as much of a technical question anymore. It's more a question of policy, right? There's been a lot of research there's actually not been that much research. There was a lot of research in the 90s about the safety of roundabouts and if they're safer or not safer when you have bikes in priority versus bikes that give way to cars. The conclusion of that research was that it's much safer to have bikes give way to cars, because it makes sense, because if a bike stops and looks before they go, you're forcing them to take responsibility for their own safety, more so than that you're putting the responsibility back on the driver. And that story, you need to have cars have priority because otherwise bikes get hit. That is still in a lot of cities, even in a lot of municipalities in the Netherlands, it's still a popular consideration. But if you think about it, that every day we have trade-offs of safety versus convenience, and safety versus accessibility, and safety versus delay all the time. That's just commonplace. And what I think is important is because there's been recent research that compared them, and they did show that bike roundabouts or municipalities that have all the bikes in priority within their urban area do show a higher number of crashes on the roundabouts themselves. They didn't check for vehicle intensities and bike intensities, because you could also argue that the more convenient and attractive you make it to ride your bike, the more people you get riding their bikes, thus the more risk the roundabout has, and that's just a fact of numbers. But it's at the same time, that figure needs to be put in perspective, because it is still significantly safer than a traffic light by a factor of 3, even in a roundabout that has priority for cyclists. So it is important to put that into perspective. Yes, it might be less safe than making bikes stop and give way to all the cars. It's still significantly safer than a traffic light where you make the bikes stop anyway. And on the flip side, you are gaining a lot in terms of accessibility, in terms of speed, in terms of reduction in delay, and that's also an important consideration. Safety is important, but it's not the only consideration in the traffic engineering world, because if that was the case, we would have banned cars outright about 60 years ago. So you can't argue that safety is the one and only argument. You have to find a balance, and it is risky, especially if you're going to be building the first one in an environment where they're not commonplace. And I would recommend building one in a place that's maybe not super busy, and maybe you find a place where you do have all the space, so you don't need to compromise on the design. And results will tell how it's going in Cambridge, but so far it seems to be going very well. So you can implement these things safely in a new environment if you take care in the design. So that was the statement on safety. Anything you want to add?
Well, I think also they didn't take into account if the roundabout was well designed. So
right.
If all the guidelines were followed, if there was enough space between the car and the cycle lane. So.
Yeah, it was a huge study, right? They compared all of the roundabouts in the Netherlands, which is hundreds. Was it? 800? Thousands.
2,000 or something.
Yeah,
like that.
which is good on them, but it would have been very useful if they had controlled for intensities and design quality, because there is a lot of poorly designed roundabouts. Even
I
in
think
the Netherlands.
they looked into 90 more closely. So
Right.
And then they checked if the different design elements had any effect on
in a sample.
Right. In a sample. But
So short story needs more research.
yes.
Potentially more dangerous, but not necessarily a showstopper. If there's any more questions, please send them our way. Then I thought the last question was actually quite funny. Is there any examples, and we had to look really hard, is there any examples of roundabouts in the Netherlands where the pedestrians have to walk, or that allow pedestrians to walk through the center of the roundabout? I had to think really hard. Did you find any?
No, or at least, well, I haven't seen all the roundabouts in the Netherlands.
2,000 apparently.
Yeah, 2,000 apparently, but no, I couldn't find any one example that had
We
that.
did find one in the USA.
Yeah.
We have a little video of it. It will pop up on the screen. I find this quite hilarious. This is, well, yeah, you could call it a roundabout.
Yeah.
You could call it, I don't even know, a mess, a hot mess. So what we're looking at here is that you can see the ladders leading into the island in the middle, then a sea of asphalt around it. And you can imagine, these are big cars, they're not even steering at all, and they can just go wherever they want. It is...
Yeah. But the width of the lane on the roundabout is
It's insane.
about 7 meters or something like
It's
that.
huge.
Maybe 8?
No, more, I think. If you look at, well, there on the widest part, there's one car. I think it's about 10 meters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Don't do this.
I wouldn't want to cross on it.
There's a nice park in the middle.
Yeah, there's
You
a
can
nice
sit
park in the
and
middle.
play with your dog.
Well, and they place some rocks on it, so you can't drive straight through.
It's amazing. All ticks all the boxes.
Yeah.
You do wonder what the design vehicle was for this thing.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a space shuttle or an airplane. Anyway.
UFO.
No, we do not have this in the Netherlands, and we would not recommend building something like this because it's unnecessary crossings.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. There is if anybody's been to Velocity in Nijmegen 2 years ago, they have the famous Keizer Karelplein, which is what looks like a roundabout, but is actually not a roundabout. And they have a little park in the middle with actual benches, except there's no way to get to it because it's 6 lanes. It's like the Arc de Triomphe, but
But the Arc de Triomphe has great separation.
yes, they thought about it.
Yeah, the tunnel.
Great separation is the answer. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So with that, we've got the 10 questions.
Yep.
I don't know if there's any questions that have come in. There has, and they will be put right on the screen. I'm moving to the roundabout capital of the US next year. Who has far too many double lane roundabouts? Where should I start in convincing them to fix these mistakes? That's a good question. Well, I would start with the photo that we're going to show you on the screen. This is, it's probably going to be soon, or maybe it's already snowing in Minnesota, a good old snack down on the roundabout. This just shows you how much excess space there was on the roundabout and how much they actually didn't need. You can see on the right hand side there's a pole. I don't know if you can see this now. There's a post here, so that shows you where the island is, and everything else is just spare asphalt. So that's maybe keep an eye on the roundabout in winter. Take some photos and see how much of that double lane is actually used regularly. Anything else? Can you convert a two lane to a single lane roundabout?
Yeah, of course you can. If you just take out the middle lane,
Right.
make the island bigger.
Just make the island bigger. Oh, easy.
Well, in most of the cases, I don't know how they connect.
Right. Yeah, they might have some.
Yeah, they
Quite
might have
fast,
some going fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of, on the screen, a good example of what we don't like, going fast roundabouts.
Yep.
Roundabouts designed for optimized speed. Where is this from?
This is in France, the city of Aubenas. So it's in the south of France. And well, this is just a typical roundabout in France. So they had the islands are actually more V's instead of what we see in the Netherlands, where you have a straight entry and exit.
More squared off.
More squared off, so you really are at an angle of 90 degrees when you enter the roundabout. In this case, it's more like 30, 40, something like that. So that means that, well, they travel a lot faster. And you can see maybe a little bit that the color of the asphalt, you can see where cars drive and where they don't drive. So I think in the top right corner, you can see that they actually take the middle part, and the outer part is hardly ever used. So you can really see that it is actually designed at a too large of a scale. Yeah.
And then maybe you don't need snow, because I can imagine maybe it doesn't snow that much in the south of France.
No, it does get hot.
It does get hot.
Maybe that helps with the asphalt coloring, but you can actually see that if you enter from the top left and you just turn right, then you hardly have to slow down at all.
It's a nice speedy
it's a nice
throughput.
turn for if you go like around 40 or something.
Which would be almost acceptable if it was just a highway or a giant roundabout at a high speed intersection. But then you see the pedestrian crossing in the top right, and that's where I'm like, ooh, that looks scary.
I wouldn't want to cross
there. No, you can imagine looking at those cars thinking, ooh, is that going to come my way? And is it going to hurt? So that's a key difference, right? Though, and this is the shape of the island tells you if it's a well-designed roundabout or not. Right. This is the tangential. I can't say that word. Versus the radial design. But there is hope for France. A little bit.
There is a little bit. I think 2 kilometers away from the previous roundabout, they built a new one. So you do see the V's, but they're a lot less sharp, or a lot less, more like this instead of this. But they do have something to learn. But you can actually see that now in this, the left corner, you can actually see that it rounds off and then it goes like this again. So you have
a wiggle.
Wiggle. So that also shows you that they thought about how to slow down cars.
Right, it's not just one swoop.
You can just go in one swoop. And this.
Right. But there's still something wrong?
Yeah. there's still something. Well, at least in the top right, well, it's not really.
No ideal.
No, and the top, the bottom right also not.
Yeah.
And you can actually see also how people drive on it. You can see that people coming from the left and going to the right, so the top right, can actually go almost straight through.
Yeah. That's a very subtle bend out. Yeah.
Very subtle bend out.
And the cross, I can see that they're not quite aligned. Is that important?
You don't have to have them on opposite sides of them. That's not.
Okay.
But you do want to have like the wiggle that they have in it, so you don't want to have one continuous swoop.
Right. If we go back to this one.
Yeah,
you can see, you mean the swoops on the outer curbs. They're a continuous line instead of a bump. Yeah. Right. That's good. Let's see what else we have here. Oh yeah, we have a little tour. Do we have time? Yeah, we have, we're going a little bit over time, but we'll go for a few more minutes to show you a tour of some roundabouts that we found. And let's start, with this one. This is just going to be us freestyling on commenting on roundabouts on the fly. This one's from Leiden. I found this one when I was driving around Leiden. It's actually a turbo roundabout that has car priority, obviously, and it has, you can see a driveway in the bottom right and a right turn bypass. So it's actually a very high capacity, semi-rural setting. It'll be high car flow, but still at grade bike crossings on all sides. But they did do the right thing and not have bikes in priority. So this one's probably pretty much by the book, right?
Yep. Yeah, and they do have the bypass separated, so at a very large distance. So that also means that for the cyclists, they don't have to cross 2 lanes.
Yeah. You can see most of the exit lanes are actually 1 lane at a time.
Yeah, all of the exit lanes.
Yeah,
and
except for the one on the left. A little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Almost. They were almost there. So
almost
close.
There.
So this is what a good turbo
Yep.
looks like, basically. Right? Let me find one that is not so good. Oh, this one's great. So we fly all the way to the beautiful town of Pijnacker. Yeah, here you can see the difference, right? With the exits, especially on the bike path in the top left corner, you can see that the bikes actually have to cross 2 lanes at a time, and you can imagine that'll be reasonably high speed, especially for this setting where it's pretty rural. There was this one. This is probably my new favorite. We play the game, What's Your Favorite Roundabout? And I found this one in Amersfoort, which I've never seen before. This one probably takes a little bit of explanation. But what you see is they had an at-grade crossing, but they wanted to increase the car capacity. So what did they do? They built a tunnel. So there's a tunnel underneath the roundabout, but then they still had a level train crossing, which I find quite hilarious. And there's a lot going on in this situation. There's a bike lane in the bottom left. There's a street in the bottom right. There's a bigger arterial probably coming in from the south. Then there's 2 train crossings going straight through the roundabout. Then there's another service lane on the right, another bike lane, and then 2 more streets from the north. So this is pretty advanced roundabouting.
Yes.
But I do find it fantastic that they built a tunnel but left the train at the ground level.
Is there a traffic light for the train?
There is a traffic light for a train. Yeah,
Okay.
you can see the stop lines here.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I guess it's not a very frequent train.
No, I hope not.
But it
This
is
a very advanced roundabouting. Yes.
Don't try this at home.
No.
Would not recommend. Do we have your favorite roundabout? Ooh, do you want to... Oh, yeah. Where's the circular? This one. Right, so this is a very suburban roundabout.
Yep.
Do you like it?
Well, there's nothing wrong with it.
I mean, a little bit.
I only think that the entry and the exit lane are quite far apart. So if the middle island between entry and exit was more close together, then it would have been better to slow people down, because now I don't think, or at least you could have slowed people down more. Yeah. Because now you only have a small curve that you have to make.
And that's a really important lesson, right? Keep the center lanes close together. Maybe an island, a couple of meters.
Yeah, an island like 2.5 meters
2.5.
For inside the urban area, and then 3 meters for outside.
But this big just separates them too far, and it means that the turning radius. Yeah.
So if you would have put them closer together at the roundabout, then you also had a curve in the road that would also slow people down. So that I think that would have been helpful.
That's good. There is one that I wanted to talk about with a bus. Because can you do a roundabout when you have a bus lane? Well, the short answer is yes. There's multiple ways to do it, right? So this is a roundabout in Zoetermeer. Well, Sweet Lake City, as we call it. I didn't want to say it, but I did. Here you can see that there's a very heavy bus lane, north-south, in both directions, actually. And they built a dedicated bus bypass in this instance, which is obviously very comfortable for the bus. Yep. Anything else that stands out in this roundabout?
Well, the exit lane for the one going right is quite strange. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that's odd.
That's odd.
You don't see that very often.
No.
No.
And I don't know what's happening with the blue lines, or at least the
Where's the blue light?
on the top.
Oh, here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a parking zone. Oh, there's that's a
Just
side
a
street.
normal side street that
Yeah.
connects to the cycle path.
And then here's
That's
yeah.
why
You find funny things when you look
Yeah.
at.
that's why we have guidelines. And
That's
you
why
can
we have
just
They're not standards.
no,
They're guidelines.
they're guidelines, so you can see what works for you.
Yeah, anything goes. And then here another one with a tram instead of a
Yep.
bus lane. So obviously a tram is a challenge.
Yep.
There is the famous example from Delft with a well, we can look at it after this one.
Yep.
I found this one quite interesting because it is much more compact.
Yep.
Because it kind of fits nicely. Any disadvantages to doing something like this, where you have the tramway going through the middle of the roundabout? Here it splits in a T-junction, but
Yep.
you can imagine it's for one lane as well.
Yeah, it depends on how much tram traffic you have, I think.
Because otherwise it just shuts down.
Yeah. I think in the Delft case, I live in Delft, so I sometimes have to cross that roundabout as a cyclist. And because you always have priority, you hardly look at any traffic lights or something. You
Right.
look at if you see another car.
Yeah.
You do look if you can safely cross, but
Yeah.
then you hardly expect traffic lights to turn on and that there's a tram coming through.
Because there's too little tram
Yeah.
traffic. It's
So
not
then,
a high frequency.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you don't want a too high frequency
No.
because then the roundabout shuts down too much.
Yeah.
But I think for cyclists, it's the hardest that there's
Yeah.
a tram.
Yeah.
Because they really don't know.
No, and there'll be a safety margin built
Yeah.
into the lights, so they turn on too early,
Mhm.
according to the cyclist, and then
Yeah.
it gets a bit trickier. So there is downsides to it,
Yeah.
but it's possible.
It is possible.
It is in
in
the
this
guidelines.
case, maybe it seems to work.
It looks pretty nice. Also, funny half turbo roundabout.
Yeah.
See with the turn-offs separated from the tram. I think that's for tram movements, I guess. So we can still go straight if the tram's coming.
Yeah.
And there is a plethora of roundabouts. We have probably time for one more, and then we really have to go. We have one a great one in here. Sorry, I have to. This one.
Yeah.
Just to end it on a funny note. What are we looking at?
Well, it is a roundabout.
It's a roundabout.
Because there are traffic lights on it?
No, I don't think so.
There are no traffic lights.
Yeah.
There is great separation, as you can see. This is close to a place where they ship a lot of flowers, or there's a lot of truck activity. So that's why they had a great separation. There's a lot of traffic coming through this roundabout. And it's a turbo rotor roundabout, I think the technical term is.
Because of the triple entry lanes.
Yeah.
Right. Then it becomes a
rotor.
next level.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
It is a bit excessive, maybe.
Yes, and it's quite hard to navigate, I think.
Yeah.
And the downside to turbo roundabouts is that if you want to take a U-turn, that you can't.
No U-turns.
No
right.
U-turns on a turbo.
No. Yeah, good point. Unless you pop over
Well,
the barrier.
If you go over a curb, I wouldn't recommend that.
No.
So if you do something like this, then it's really important to have good signage in front, like a couple of 100 meters before it, saying, okay, if you want to go this way, then you have to have this lane. Yeah. And sometimes they even write it on the street as well.
In the pavement.
Because
you have to pick a lane well before you get to the roundabout. Yeah. No last minute.
No, if you have a
heart.
last minute think you can. No.
See you later.
Your car doesn't appreciate that.
And the other important thing is, don't try this with bikes at grade.
No.
No way.
No way.
No way, no how.
No.
Definitely need great separation.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good advice to end it with, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Eveline. I thought it was really interesting. I learned a few new things, so that's always nice. I hope you found it interesting at home as well. Thanks for registering with Mobycon Academy. We hope to see you more of you in the next year. We'll be publishing a new webinar every week, so there'll be a pretty ruthless schedule, but it'll be exciting. For now, we wish you happy holidays. Take some time off in December, hopefully, and we hope to see you next year. So thank you for joining us tonight.